Now, originally on Twitter, I had asked for recommendations, and I was planning on doing a video on 10 mangas you should read before the end of 2020, but I think that would be a little too much to expect. Before on this channel, I did talk about Asano's masterpiece, Pun Pun, and so all 4 of these mangas give a very similar feeling and effect to Pun Pun, although not to the extent. So hopefully I got your attention with that. And now let's talk about the first manga, Solanin. Solanin is also written by Asano, the same author who did Oyasumi Pun Pun, but Solanin is only 28 chapters. With that being said, that means you don't really have that much time to grow attached to the character like you do with Pun Pun, but nonetheless, this is still an extremely beautiful work that shows Asano's incredible ability of artwork and communicating emotion. Solanin basically starts off with this couple who's kind of been living together in some pretty harsh circumstances. The girl ends up quitting her job early on in the manga, and essentially the major question with both of them is, what are they going to do for the rest of their life? Will everything be okay? It's really a manga that discusses some of the trivial problems of life and real life issues that you can go through, but in the end you end up finding this beautiful closure and the way you move on from tragic events within your life. It definitely can give you a feeling of sadness, as many times the manga can offer hope and then strip that hope away from you, but it definitely doesn't have the overly dark and depressing feeling Pun Pun does have. This definitely is like the lighter version of Pun Pun, kind of like a demo of what Asano is capable of doing, but nonetheless it's an absolute brilliant work. So again, as it applies with the rest of these works, if you are someone who loves Asano's ability and everything he demonstrated in Pun Pun and you haven't read Solanin, I definitely recommend that you do so. Now, I'm going to be giving these out in the order in which I read them, and I read all 4 of these back to back to back to back, so yikes. And I know technically I should save this one for last, but here I want to give you the best one that I read out of these 4. For me, the best out of these 4 was easily The Horizon. The Horizon is around 60 chapters if I'm not mistaken, and the setting takes place in this post-apocalyptic world where you find this little boy surviving, and he meets this little girl. And it's honestly so insane how smooth it is of a read, and again, it has that ability to communicate emotion through a very dark look in some of the characters' eyes. Some of the feelings of hopelessness and just overall pain can be communicated so clearly, and it's done great through this post-apocalyptic setting. And what also really helps it is seeing how the little boy and girl are drawn in an extremely generic sense, so it's almost as if you could put yourself in that manga. The boy and the girl, through their adventures, end up really questioning a lot of things, like death, life, the whole idea of struggling and living on. What does it mean to have a good life? What does it mean to find love? What does it mean to hate? Is murder okay? When is murder okay? The feeling of drowning in the darkness, but then swimming to the top of the ocean to see the beautiful sun. The Horizon. It tackles the idea of suffering the consequences of your actions and also the concept of death so well that yes, whilst death can be a tragic and sad thing, you shouldn't have all your focus on it, and you should also allow yourself to enjoy the moments and memories you make while you're alive. I think if I were to pick the stories that emotionally hit me as hard, I'd say Pun Pun was a 10, I think Solanin is like a 6 or a 7, and Horizon is easily an 8 or a 9. With everything I said along with the imagery in the manga, this is one that I would highly recommend to you, and if I could only pick one on this list, this would be the one I would recommend easily. And real quick, I should also throw something else in there about it. Solanin has more of a slice of life, casual feel to it, while the Horizon genuinely feels tense. It feels like there's action to it. And again, that's due to the setting that is placed within the manga. So if you're someone that maybe might not like something like Solanin or Pun Pun due to its more, I guess, slice of life, normal feel to it, then Horizon will probably be more of your cup of tea due to, again, the amount of tension that the story can create through very extreme events. Now that I think about it, the Horizon kind of feels like the best Fire Punch had to offer, but even better and without some of the very questionable narrative decisions. It manages to feel like a 200-300 chapter long story, but in a much more condensed and efficient amount of time, which I really appreciate. But now that I'm done praising the Horizon, we can move on to the next manga on this list. Let's talk about Our Happy Time, the shortest one on this list, and it's only 8 chapters long. So if you want to get the shorter thing out of the way, I would definitely recommend this. It's similar to 3 Days of Happiness in the sense that it kind of tackles almost the exact same things, but in a very different manner and in half of the time. Now, if I had to pick between the two, I do think 3 Days of Happiness is my preferable choice, but Our Happy Time is nonetheless still a brilliant work of art. Now, Our Happy Time, we started off with a girl who seems to be not, well, I'm gonna just be blunt, she's an absolute jerk. Like, if you could backhand smack her, you would. But that's without the context of knowing what happened to her in her past. Her aunt is a nun, and she visits people on death row, and one of the people that she visits is a guy the same age as the girl, and he's had an extremely rough life, and he ended up committing murder. So long story short, the girl meets the guy, and they end up talking a good bit through these 8 chapters. And like I said in 3 Days of Happiness, it tackles the theme of death and love and kind of healing each other's wounds, which is essentially what kind of happens with these two. You end up finding out that she went through this horrible event, and she was once someone who was known for playing the piano but quit it due to what ends up happening to her. And through both of them speaking to each other, she helps him overcome his issues and kind of his cold, shut off from the world behavior, and he helps her move on from her regret. And in the end, both of them kind of end up better people by the end of it. Now, I don't want to give up the ending of Our Happy Time, but based off of what I've kind of said about the story and what feeling it gives, I think you kind of know what to expect. It's still a beautiful read, and it's brilliant how it's able to tackle again such heavy themes and do it well in 8 chapters. But I will say it can feel a little bit unnatural and rushed due to the fact that it does it in a short amount of time. I think 3 Days of Happiness was impressive, is that it did it in 16 chapters, but it still felt like a natural progression. In Our Happy Time, it kind of felt like bam, 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 and then that was it. So if you feel like the relationship can come off as a little bit unnatural, I can say it's understandable, but for the most part, I will say it was still well executed enough to drive the themes across beautifully. Now, I will also admit, after reading Solanin and The Horizon back to back, by the time I got to this, I was kind of extremely jaded. So that's possibly it as well. I think when reading, again, Pon Pon being a 10 in terms of how it hit me in the feels, The Horizon a 9, Solanin like a 6 or a 7, 3 Days of Happiness was like a 9, Our Happy Time just kind of got the short end of the stick being the thing that I read after all of these. Now the final work that I'm going to be talking about, the one that was not in the thumbnail and that I saved for last because it was the last one I read, and I think this is the most beautiful of all of these. I know I've used beautiful to describe all 3 of these, but I think A Silent Voice is one that you can read, and after reading it, you will mature so much, and I think truly come to appreciate certain things and learn to be careful with what you do. It's one of those works where I think you can really learn self-improvement and moving on from your past and being a better person. Now, I know I've been building it up a lot, but if you haven't got what I'm speaking about yet, there was also a movie that I yet have not seen, but I heard the movie really did break a lot of people. But yes, I am talking about A Silent Voice. The story, we meet our protagonist, this guy who is in his class, minding his own business, doing his thing, and then a girl transfers to the school, and she's deaf. Now, most people, when they see a deaf person, they probably would be nice. But for some reason in this manga, a lot of the people in the story are just absolute horrible human beings that I absolutely detest. And in fact, the protagonist is one of those people. He bullies the girl to the point that she ends up leaving the school, but then he finds her years later, and now he goes out of his way to try and make her as happy as possible. It's beautiful to see how the relationship builds up between the two of them, and it's one of the most adorable, wholesome, but again, just absolute beautiful reads that I've had. Seeing how he looks upon himself in the past and hates himself for it, and at times wishes that people still didn't judge him based off of his past behavior, is great. It has a lot of really exquisite, lighthearted moments that makes you attached to some of the characters, and seeing the protagonist once again kind of grow up and learn to appreciate things like friendship is absolutely amazing. It's able to emotionally grab you and really get you invested into the characters. And it's, I don't even know how to describe it. You need to read A Silent Voice. This is definitely the most, I'd say, satisfying as well of all of the reads, because with some of these reads after reading them, I was kind of feeling empty. You feel empty, you're like, oh man, that stinks. But when you read this and you see the conclusion of it, you end up quite happy with it. And so I think with all of that's happened this year, even though personally for me it's been a great year where I've really been able to invest into self-improvement and really be content with a lot of things, and a lot of that's owed to you, the viewer. Thank you so much for your support. I wanted to share these 4 works with you because I think anyone will benefit from reading them. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have read these works, let me know your thoughts on them down in the comment section below. But if you are new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell notifications, that way you're notified whenever a new video pops up on some of your favorite anime, manga, or whatever content. As always, this has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.